By early 1942, the Atlantic Ocean had become a graveyard for Allied shipping. German U-boats lurked beneath the waves like silent predators, sinking freighters with terrifying efficiency. Convoy after convoy was lost. Food, oil, and ammunition meant for Britain never arrived. Factories in Europe began to starve for supplies, and morale plummeted. The Allies desperately needed a miracle, not on the battlefield, but in the shipyards. America responded with one of the largest industrial mobilizations in human history. Thousands of men and women swarmed into hastily built coastal shipyards, welding torches blazing day and night. The Liberty Ship program was born, designed to churn out cargo vessels faster than the enemy could sink them. But traditional methods were too slow, taking 200 to 240 days per ship. The challenge was clear: build faster, cheaper, and smarter, or lose the war at sea. In the beginning, even the Liberty ship, designed for rapid construction, still took nearly 8 months to complete. Then came Henry Kaiser, an engineer with no shipbuilding background but a genius for efficiency. He transformed shipyards into production lines, cutting build time to just 40 days. The world was stunned. Newspapers called it the miracle of steel. But Kaiser and his workers weren't done. One day, a single victory ship, the Robert E. Peary, was assembled in a record-breaking 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. From keel laying to launch, the process was a spectacle of coordination and precision. The secret wasn't just more manpower, it was better technique. The idea that would change everything didn't come from a scientist or general, but from a single welder on the factory floor who dared to question the manual. Welding replaced riveting to save time, but it created an invisible enemy: metal fatigue and brittle fractures. The new Liberty ships were built from high-tensile steel that, when welded incorrectly, could fail catastrophically in cold weather. Ships split in half mid-voyage, sometimes without warning, sending cargo and crew to the bottom. Investigators discovered that rapid, uneven welding caused intense stresses that remained locked in the hull. As temperatures dropped, those stresses became fractures. It was a national scandal. Engineers proposed stronger alloys, slower cooling, and stricter welding sequences. Yet production couldn't wait. Every day mattered. Amid this chaos, a young welder began experimenting on scrap panels, convinced the root of the problem wasn't the steel itself, but how heat was applied to it. His insight would reshape industrial welding forever. At Kaiser's Richmond shipyard, the noise was deafening. Grinders shrieked, cranes groaned, sparks rained like molten snow. In this world of fire and steel, one welder quietly broke the rules. Instead of following the prescribed end-to-end weld sequence, he started his welds from the center of each plate and worked outward. His supervisors ridiculed it. "That's ridiculous," they said. "Heat flows outward, you'll ruin the alignment." But he noticed something extraordinary. When welding from the middle, the metal didn't warp or curl. The panel stayed flat. Alignment problems vanished. It was as if the steel itself relaxed under the balanced heat. Soon, his small experiment began to ripple across the yard. Foremen tried it on full-scale hull sections, and to everyone's astonishment, it worked perfectly. What began as defiance turned into discovery. The welder's trick made perfect physical sense once studied. When you weld, the molten metal expands and contracts rapidly, introducing uneven stress. Welding from one end concentrates that stress along a single axis, bending the plate. But by starting in the center and working outward, the heat disperses evenly in all directions, allowing expansion to cancel itself out. The result is near zero distortion. That meant panels didn't need to be reheated, pressed, or reshaped later, a process that once devoured hours per section. Engineers were stunned by its simplicity. What once took 12 welders, 3 shifts could now be done by 6 in one. It was a perfect storm of physics, intuition, and courage, a lowly welder's idea proving what textbooks had missed. That experience often sees what theory overlooks. Armed with the new welding method, Kaiser's shipyards went all in on modular construction. Instead of building hulls piece by piece in a dry dock, they prefabricated massive sections, each welded perfectly flat thanks to the center outward method. These sections, weighing dozens of tons, were moved by crane and fitted together like a giant 3D puzzle. While one team welded a bow, another built the stern, and a third assembled the deckhouse. The rhythm was industrial symphony. Cranes swung, welders sparked, riveters hammered. Foremen shouted timing codes. It was wartime choreography. A ship that once took months was now emerging in less than a week. The innovation didn't just cut time, it built reliability. Fewer alignment errors meant fewer leaks, fewer repairs, and a ship that could head to war days after launch. Henry J. Kaiser was more than a businessman, he was a visionary. Known as the father of mass production shipbuilding, he approached war production like an engineer approaches an equation. Find the bottleneck, eliminate it, repeat. He embraced the welder center outward technique wholeheartedly, incorporating it into every shipyard under his control. Kaiser introduced 24-hour shifts, prefabricated jigs, and even on-site childcare for his workers, an unheard of innovation in wartime America. He believed morale and efficiency were two sides of the same coin. Under his leadership, shipyards turned into factories of victory. Between 1941 and 1945, Kaiser's yards launched over 1,400 Liberty and Victory ships, effectively overwhelming Axis submarines with sheer output. Each hull carried not just cargo, but the weight of human ingenuity. What once were docks now resembled automobile assembly lines. Massive steel modules moved along tracks, cranes slid them into perfect position, and workers synchronized every motion. Each spark was timed to the second. The welder's technique ensured that sections came together seamlessly. No grinding, no reshaping, no lost hours. Shipyards began setting speed records weekly. Workers spoke of building ships like cars, and for the first time in maritime history, that phrase wasn't an exaggeration. Factory whistles marked each stage's completion. Overhead loudspeakers announced new record times. Visitors marveled at the mechanical ballet of human labor and steel precision. It was war production at its zenith, modernity forged in flame. Then came the day that made history. On November 12, 1942, the keel of the Robert E. Peary was laid at the Richmond Yard. Workers labored non-stop in rotating shifts, men, women, and even teenagers. By dawn on November 16th, less than 5 days later, the ship was fully assembled, painted, and ready for launch. Thousands gathered to watch as the great vessel slid into the water amid thunderous applause. It wasn't just a record, it was a statement. The impossible had become routine. The Peary joined the Atlantic convoys within weeks, carrying ammunition to Britain. The miracle ship became a national symbol of industrial power. At its heart lay one secret, a welder's so-called ridiculous idea that had quietly made history. For every ship launched faster, a convoy sailed safer. Every cargo vessel that reached Britain meant more tanks in North Africa, more rations in France, more bombs over Berlin. Production itself became a weapon. The Nazis couldn't sink ships as fast as America could build them. The center outward welding trick, small as it seemed, was part of that industrial storm that buried the Axis beneath an avalanche of logistics. Allied admirals marveled at the pace. Even propaganda posters glorified it. 5 days to sea. That's the American way. The technique symbolized the new era of warfare, where victory didn't come only from courage in battle, but from intelligence in factories. The implications went far beyond ships. Engineers studying the technique realized it applied to any large welded structure, bridges, pipelines, aircraft frames, even skyscrapers. The principle was universal. Distribute heat evenly, and you distribute strength evenly. Post-war industries adopted it eagerly. Shipyard veterans carried the method into the private sector, teaching new generations of builders. The ridiculous trick became standard engineering doctrine, cited in welding textbooks for decades. Its origin, the hands of an unknown welder during wartime panic, was almost forgotten. But its legacy shaped the post-war world of steel, cement, and progress. Despite the speed records, shipyards never abandoned discipline. Every hull underwent rigorous inspection, X-rays for hidden cracks, stress tests, pressure seals. The new welding method reduced flaws so dramatically that rejection rates fell by half. Yet Kaiser insisted on double-checking every joint. The war had no mercy for mistakes at sea. A single failed weld could mean a lost convoy. In training centers, instructors drilled workers in heat management, electrode angles, and sequential welding paths. Shipyards had become classrooms for science in motion. Each launch wasn't just an industrial feat, it was proof that precision could coexist with urgency. The Liberty ship had been a stopgap. The Victory ship was evolution. Longer, faster, and built for endurance, it was the culmination of every lesson learned from the Liberty program. With the Welder's technique standardized, Victory ships emerged sleek, powerful, and ready for long service. They could reach speeds of 17 knots, fast enough to outrun most U-boats. Their hulls were stronger, their welds cleaner, their decks reinforced. When peace returned, many of these vessels continued in commercial trade, hauling goods across oceans for decades. Each voyage was a moving monument to wartime innovation and a welder's spark of genius. Behind the roaring furnaces and endless clangs stood ordinary people, welders, riveters, crane operators, draftsmen, and thousands of women who had never held tools before the war. They became Rosie the riveters of the sea, working shoulder to shoulder with men under blistering heat and punishing schedules. The welder who defied conventions symbolized all of them: the courage to innovate, the spirit to endure, and the belief that ideas could win wars. Every glowing seam on a Victory ship carried fingerprints of determination. It was a story not of machines, but of humans who refused to say, "It can't be done." When the war ended, generals and politicians took the headlines, but history remembers that wars are won by problem solvers. One welder's quiet defiance turned into a process that saved weeks per ship, strengthened fleets, and hastened Allied victory. His ridiculous trick became an engineering legend, proof that innovation is often born not from command, but from curiosity. Every Victory ship that crossed the Atlantic carried a piece of that lesson, that greatness sometimes starts with a spark, a question, and the courage to break the rules. The war forged more than steel. It forged ingenuity itself.